Fang the Hunter, Issue 3. Why did Eggman go through all the trouble of bringing Fang and his allies here? He could have had this talk with him where he was before. Fang's made to look stupid by saying it isn't Eggman's territory for no good reason. Just to give Eggman a good moment. Maybe I'd be more satisfied with good moments if they weren't forced at someone else's expense. Eggman says he saved them because he wanted to know why they were here, which makes sense. Bean tells Fang to just tell him already. He shouldn't need to tell him that. What's to consider? He tells him or dies. Considering how long it took for Fang to lampshade Bean being the voice of reason, I think he only said this because it took that long for Flynn to hear so much criticism for it that he felt like he had to address it to pander to them. Pointing out your problems doesn't make them go away. Especially not when you introduce a continuity error with it. He didn't act like it felt unnatural all the other times. He's not as annoying when reasonable, so it's like he was fixing his character. But it's too late to make Bean the voice of reason when the change to IDW is his opportunity to do so. And at this point, most of his fans want the Archie portrayal. I say this because there's a lot more Archie stories than games, so the people who bought all those stories gave more money to Sega than the people who only bought the games, so they're more profitable. So this is bad marketing by disappointing most of the most profitable Sonic fans. And it only wouldn't be that way if most Bean fans never bought the comics. Eggman acts like he never knew about the 8th Emerald. Well, that's lame. When he said he just happened to be in the area while refusing to tell him why, I assumed he was here looking for it. This isn't even the main Eggman. Why is he still writing him as ridiculously out of character parody of himself long after the Metal Virus is over? I thought issue 50 was trying to indicate that he learned not to do that because he made him cool again. Because he knew he had to do that to appease Eggman fans. Some people like me hated Pontac and Graf making Eggman a parody of himself. So anyone who felt that way has no excuse for liking when Flynn does it. At least Pontac and Graf didn't have him be apocalyptically stupid through laziness. He just said the wrong things. This miniseries doesn't know what tone to go for with Eggman, because it had him capture them in his first appearance, so expect him to be taken more seriously. And while even serious villains cannot know things, that doesn't excuse it when there's no reason for him not to know about it and even accuse Fang of lying. I think Fang didn't tell him who his contact was in case Eggman went after him for more info and he risked never getting another contact to help him because the news spread. Too bad there's no room in the panel for a thought bubble explaining that. Because it was wasted by the pictures of stuff that aren't there in-universe. Like it's John Gray with his anime backgrounds. Just because it's a cartoon doesn't mean this is okay. Sonic never showed things that aren't there in most of his shows. This is why I stopped watching the Pokemon anime as a kid. Eggman decides to tell them to do him a favor just in case Fang's right. So that's smart at least. Fang tells him to hire him or else, even though he's obviously at his mercy right now. So the idiot ball gives Eggman an excuse to threaten him. That looked cool, but like with Mimic, I'm too distracted by being pissed off that the villain only succeeded at the expense of another character being exaggeratedly stupid to be happy about it. Eggman takes his time before releasing them, and says he put the hard-boiled heavies in charge of a test flight. Why did he trust them a third time? See what I mean about parroting him? This is flat out disrespectful. And not disrespecting him for what he deserves. The fact that he's evil. Instead he's just flanderizing him because he used Metal Sonic again. Despite the fact that he reprogrammed him to be loyal in IDW. Making the argument against trusting him again irrelevant. But apparently Flynn has so little respect for him that he assumes he didn't reprogram him in the games and is basing this off that. Never mind that Eggman told this guy he's gonna reprogram him and showed no indication he wouldn't. Him forgetting or changing his mind would be laughably out of character. The entire reason he put animals in robots is because he hates free will. So again, he would never just keep it around for fun. He already gets his fun from fighting Sonic and putting animals in robots. I've always understood not respecting Eggman in theory because he lost to Sonic a million times, but it's ignoring the fact that he has to lose to Sonic meta-wise. It's not his fault that he's the main villain, so he's forced to fight him over and over again. At least Pontac and Graf stuck to making fun of him for the flaw that he actually had. You know you screwed up when you had me defending them. Classic Sonic comics are meant to be aimed at classic fans, but any classic fan worth their salt would at least notice all the ways this is completely disrespectful or accidentally inaccurate to the games. People defend Sonic being too trusting because he's a hero. What's Eggman's excuse? They got things in common in the games. They're not supposed to be too similar. This is supposed to be a joke. That's what's really off-putting about this. Massacring a character's credibility is a joke. Everyone who insulted Sonic Boom Knuckles, and any time Knuckles was Flanderized, had better hate this just as much on the same merits. I don't even like Eggman, but IDW would have you believe he's never been smart at all. This is the main villain of the series, remember? And Fang has been made a joke out of too. Isn't it a problem to have no credible serious villain for an action series? All the serious IDW villains are trapped in the modern era of the comic. This isn't even original. Crocbot did this. Eggman can't even track his own warship because it keeps disappearing. Fang tells him the obvious and is hired. Sonic does a lot of pacing behind Tails because he's impatient. Where is that impatience in the modern era? It's sad that it forgot one of the things that made Sonic popular. I take this character flaw instead any day. Even if game purists might think this is Flanderization too, just because we never saw Sonic be impatient in the stories of the games. But his idle animation from waiting is what it's based on. The only reason I can imagine it being complained about is that it's weird for him to be angry at Tails because of it. Better to exaggerate a flaw that was already there than make one up whole cloth though. Still, Sonic's only being rude by not keeping his pacing to a room he isn't in. It makes him look pathetic that he's so devoid of intelligence that he has nothing to do. Even Sonic Boom is written better in that he plays video games, no problem. And writing Sonic as if he'd hate literally any activity that doesn't involve speed, that would really be Flanderizing him, by refusing to even make him feel human. It's not like joggers and marathon runners have no hobbies outside of running. No one would be defending that for Tails, and he's not human. Tails even suggests taking a nap because he did that earlier, but God forbid he listens to his advice in IDW. Though it's realistic that he doesn't feel like it here. Game-focused fans think of Sonic as running to explore the world in his free time to see more of the world firsthand, which has merit in that no other Sonic character would have that hobby. I think the reason I don't think of him as doing that all the time is because you think in all the time he's been alive, and considering how fast he is, he would have already explored every inch of the world by now. If Sonic had a cell phone or something, then he could simply go on a run for fun with barely any consequences. You could call him the second he's done. And the Sonic I know would return to his side so fast that it wouldn't matter how far away he is from him. He's run faster than a black hole for at least a little bit before. If he loves going on a run so much, he'd see it as worth it that he'd delay the adventure. And who said he had to run in a straight line? He could keep turning around to explore a smaller area. Also, if a place is pretty enough, why wouldn't he go visit it multiple times? I would have had a reason to complain if its impatience was kept to one panel. Then I'd just be like, yep, it's Sonic alright. Instead it drew so much attention to it that it actually confirmed he's been literally doing nothing but pacing the entire time like a weirdo when it was ambiguous before. It could have cut straight to him showing Sonic the ship seeker. Sonic asks how it works and gets told an explanation that anybody would understand. Once again, this pathetically unfunny cliche joke is used when it was already used in the Tails Anniversary comic. Most people know what a logarithm means by this point, at least in this kind of context, so only the word locus is an issue. And why doesn't he just ask what locus means then? I don't even know why he used it because he's never around anyone who says it. He only has an excuse for using big words that there are no alternatives to. Locus means place. If Sonic was this stupid, which he's not, then he wouldn't have asked how it worked. It's not even a character for Sonic to ask how an invention works, but it does have potential to be good by showing he's smarter than you'd think, which is at least supported by him engineering things in AOSTH. And again, the fact that he's clever in the games. This squanders a chance to improve the character, giving him hidden depths by even making a complete joke out of the series' mascot. He says he needs to take some more time to install the thing in the plane, even though he's holding it, and apparently the lightning drawn around his dish meant nothing because it really isn't working yet. So it comes off like another forced joke. You know, like we hated Pontac and Graph for. At least when they made the characters and Generations make fun of themselves, it was because of canon traits they had before. And also, it's better that they say stupid things than do stupid things. This entire scene was pointless because it could have been cut without the story making no sense. So the joke annoys me because the scene ends there. It only existed for comedy relief. Why? What about this comic is so dark that it needs it, when Eggman's a bumbling idiot? And his only threatening moments are behavior I take for granted because it's average quality. I saw it a million times. It's brightly colored. Even Fang can be a bumbling idiot. What's serious about it that it needs this? We didn't have tons of comedy in the classic era, so again, it doesn't really fit. Fang says that because the further the warship goes, the longer it takes to vanish. That tells him that the vanishing thing needs to recharge, and that lets him calculate based on its past locations and times between when and where he needs to wait at. I love how smart he is. See, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want more of from the characters that are supposed to be cool. Idiots aren't cool, and fighting robots doesn't make an idiot cool when Tails can fight and be smart. If he knows he's supposed to make Fang smart, why does it keep making a complete mockery of him? It's not a good joke. Bean was supposed to be the comedy relief, and he's even got a convenient shield for criticism because he's crazy. So why not give all those stupid moments to him? Is there any point to having it be Fang? It makes me wonder if he only gave him smart moments because Sega told him he's supposed to have those, so he wrote the plot around them. So why won't he write the plot around smart observations and planning from characters all the time? Tails is one of the most main characters, but the plot's not usually written around him being smart. Sonic's not an engineer, but that doesn't mean he's supposed to be an idiot hero because of it. And now Tails is more out of focus than ever in favor of the Diamond Cutters, whose smart people are ineffectual. Fang's smart enough to realize that he might appreciate if his teammates left because Bean's annoying, but somehow not smart enough to keep this to himself. I also don't remember Bean being the type to tease his teammates intentionally, implying that they're never right. Considering how constantly right Fang is in the miniseries, he's either being crazy again or gaslighting him for a joke. What a jerk. Now I don't blame Fang for thinking them as flunkies instead of friends, because that would be awful for their self-esteem. It's no better than Sonic taunting Knuckles. Fang has his vehicle take its time to eventually get him and Bean onto the airship. Oh yeah, someone might think it's weird that they weren't shot down when they were noticed by the bad guys. It's a panel that really shouldn't have been there, because we wouldn't have assumed it was like that. But curiosity is a believable motive for a character. It's the same reason Eggman rescued them. And curiosity kills the cat in real life all the time. Realistic mistake or not, it still makes him look like an idiot. Bean thinks they could just ask the robots what's going on because they're working for Eggman, even though he wasn't told Eggman sent out an order to the robots to like them before or after he got hired again by him. And yeah, it was obvious the hard-boiled heavies went rogue. Why else would Eggman have been unable to track and contact the ship? So Bean's forced to be stupid to make Fang look smart. It's entertaining that Bean likes that this won't be easy, but it makes me all the more confused then that he was considering ditching Fang because his adventures weren't easy. I guess just because some of them fail. Why was an entire page wasted on boredom? Of course, I like that they aren't talking because it makes it faster to read, but if you didn't have this page, the plot would have made just as much sense. At least Bean was riding a robot and Bark was holding the bottom of a crate, instead of nothing new happening at all. And Fang got to suffer again by being scared. But seriously, he's not writing for a game, he's writing for a comic. Fang says he can feel the power coming from something. Good thing he's Mobian or this would make no sense. Now I can assume the special power he has is a very faint Chaos Emerald sense. He's just unlucky that it's so faint. A robot threatens them. I don't think it has a personality, so I don't care enough about him to call him or his siblings by name. They're just killer robots. If I thought him using a meme in dialogue was lame before, it got 1,000 times worse when he said touchy instead of pass. This isn't supposed to be for kindergartners. And who else would not think this word was lame? It's way too contrasting with the severe menace of his ball and chain weapon and how close he is to them, and the darkness around his eyes. And the way the eyes of the Motobug are trying to be menacing too. There was no place for a joke here. Why try to diminish the seriousness? Did you really think people would find it too scary to handle when this is a bunch of villains in danger? If anything, people might be rooting for Fang to get hurt. Anybody who complained about Chip ruining the drama with comedy, myself included, should hate it when Flynn does it too. And why are 3 panels of nothing happening before he says another meme? At least the memes make sense in context, but still, it's not a good reference if getting that it's a reference ruins the appeal for some. He's attacked, and I don't know why that's censored by a sound effect word when he's a robot. Sega shouldn't have thought only kids that can't handle exploding robots would read this comic when most Sonic fans are adults, and even then, what kid is that? Fang rides a Motobug at least. The only thing new about this is that Fang is doing it. He has a novel idea to threaten to destroy an ally of one of the robots to make him stay put. And it works. And there's more ill-placed comedy because the Motobug has a human name given to him by a robot. I immediately recognize this is a reference to Polygon Jim. A Motobug got named after him as a tribute to him after he died. So it makes me feel a little uncomfortable to see a Motobug called Jimmy in an underwhelming comic. Bark flips a switch, giving Fang access to something that looks just like the Warp Topaz, and is confusingly called that when everyone assumed the classic Sonic comics were in a separate continuity entirely because of Sega, or at least Tails saying classic Sonic is from another dimension and forces, which could have been mistranslation or Pontek and Graph's fault, which would explain this even happening. It's too bad it had its presence spoiled on me, because this is the interesting part of the miniseries. So why don't Clutch and Mimic show up in these? Now I'm too focused on wondering about that to want to pay attention to what Heavy King's saying. I would have said he's the serious villain in the classic Sonic comics, but he looks too goofy for me to think of him that way. And he's too boring to instantly come to mind when I'm thinking of villains. The guy's not explaining that it came from another universe, which it must have because it doing time travel would come out of nowhere. Even if time and space are linked. The fact remains, it's not like you use chaos control to time travel. There's a reason you needed 2 emeralds to do it. So it traveling to the past would be as arbitrary as a Phantom Ruby giving Eggman amnesia. As if that's how it was in the games. I know magic things have some leeway in logic, but imagine if the Chaos Emeralds made an elephant show up. And the writer said it makes total sense because it's magic. You don't have to explain it. New powers as the plot demands is literally a bad writing trope. Sadly, this robot doesn't tell me why the thing arbitrarily showed up for him despite its last issue pretending that putting it back in its place would calm it down. At least this proves me right that it didn't. It feels a bit contrived that the gem happened to warp to a world that it never got taken to before, when it never sent Sonic to another dimension in the 900th adventure issue, despite the excuse for it warping him all the time being that it was still overcharged with the 7 Emeralds' power. And it isn't still like that, since it says its own power is meager. It just coincidentally ran out of overcharged energy right after it warped here. I assume the reason it warped to this dimension specifically and sent Sonic to the Soul Dimension is that at least somebody has used it in the past to go to these places for a visit before. because otherwise it'd be a little too plot convenient that it's this place, and not one of the infinite other dimensions. Even then, it's still too convenient that these two dimensions specifically were visited. And it'd be equally plot convenient if only two dimensions were the most easy to warp to from the original dimension out of all of the other dimensions. And if it was just back in time, what incentive did that person who time traveled have to travel to that time in particular? None. The fact that Heavy King knows its name is proof that it's had a long history of coming here, since if it was from another dimension, it should have its own name for it. So it has to be that the name came from here or was agreed upon by someone from Tangle's dimension. But it's such a lazy name, it makes sense if it was coincidentally given the same name twice. At least if it's possible to recognize that as a topaz on sight. But Warp Gem would make just as much sense. The story just has to rub it in that Fang was technically misinformed, and he gets a panel telling him no, when it might have just been funnier if no was just implied. And we see his teammates glare at him. Come to think of it, this is like explaining the joke, which Pontac and Graf were also complained at for. Him being wrong would only matter if Eggman didn't reward him for getting it for him, specifically because it wasn't the Chaos Emerald. And this would normally be in character. But this is the same guy who paid him in advance. So apparently, other than remembering that he's evil, I should ask myself what's the opposite of how Eggman would really act. The Heavies were tasked with mining new powerful gems. He should have said Chaos Emeralds, because those are the only powerful gems in the world. I'm supposed to believe the Warp Topaz has no power of its own when it clearly does if it lets you warp in the first place. Eggman's order would have been exceedingly clear that powerful meant magical, and this is still magical. I like that Fang says he appreciates the craftiness of using someone's exact words. That makes the fact that they're able to talk worth it. He says that the robots technically never heard the orders to return to port, and he likes their style. He asks if he could just leave and say he never found them. But he should know they never let him leave with something useful to them. Why did he turn into IDW Sonic? He's not a pacifist who thinks he can talk his way out of a fight. He wouldn't want to. He tried to kill Sonic 8 times for money when he could have stuck to treasure hunting for money. And he has Bean to throw bombs at him right there. An entire page is wasted as the story ends. If comic space was used more wisely before, maybe the story could have ended just as well with the previous panel. We could have saved comic space by not having this guy give him exposition for no reason that we could have assumed. Like exposition about the Warp Topaz. Instead, Fang gets made a fool of once again and downplays the drama. If he knew he'd do the same if he was them, he really did have no reason to think they'd let him leave. When they're killer robots. Why would he have thought of them as idiots? This is the most pointless attempt at a cliffhanger ever. Because we all know they're gonna survive. They're game characters. And you could end the fight at any moment and still have an effective cliffhanger. So it's not like it had to have padding or else the fight would have started before the issue ended. It'd still be just as tense if it ended during the fight. Just have it end after Fang got hit. It's cool that the Warp Topaz went to the classic comics, but it's also confusing and hypocritically arbitrary of Sega if they only let this thing from the main issues cross over to here, and probably not people like Clutch or concepts from the modern games, despite the fact that it's from modern Sonic 2. And it would have been interesting. But for all I know, that isn't a rule. It just doesn't happen because Flynn thinks he'd missed the point of classic Sonic comics. I get it, but it misses the point of a new story if you refuse to do anything new. And IDW would finally be unique if it was the first ever time classic Sonic had a bunch of modern elements in it. Some modern elements would be cool to see here for the first time. It could be an excuse to bring back old modern concepts that were put to rest since the game's already happened. Because it's another dimension, and you can warp them to them with the Warp Topaz at least. And finally confirm that in IDW, because it shouldn't be able to time travel as well. Or that really opens up a can of worms with it being OP. Why didn't the villains find out it could do that while studying it and take advantage? That should mean it'll be used to go back in time to undo something after warping back to Sonic's dimension inevitably. Surge should be pissed that she didn't get to kill her creator, And the same logic behind Sonic runs around the world for fun could apply to Surge too. Especially since she loves to use her powers, so using her powers would mean running around to explore the world. So you think she would find the thing? It could have just had them use Chaos Control to warp the ship, making the Emerald amplified in power with technology to do so. And it makes sense, and would make the plot lucky that it even happened. This issue by Ian Flynn has Eggman uncreatively hire Fang again, this time to head for the warship of the hard-boiled heavies, who somehow weren't reprogrammed to be fully loyal to Eggman. Which is a pathetically unfunny attempt at a joke, and that massive contrivance shouldn't be the whole reason the miniseries happened. Of course it was too good to be true that it didn't seem contrived. So instead it only happened because of this, and because the Warp Topaz conveniently chose this place or time period to warp to, despite us being told it would be neutralized by getting put back in its place. Neutralized doesn't mean it uses its power again. It doesn't even try to justify why it came here out of every other universe. Having Eggman be the one who hires Fang again is uncreative, so it's really lame. When expected the miniseries to be new, or what was the point of it? The only way it was new was how it used old ideas. Particularly the Warp Topaz coming here. Couldn't they have had a government reprogram the hard-boiled heavies against Eggman? That way you could have him lose track of his warship and need to hire Fang without making him look like a complete idiot.